Trevon, parenting. What's your view?
I agree with all the points that were made. I think one of the things that came to mind for me was looking at the children I teach and being in the school system. One of the things that I notice a lot of the time is everyone has different concepts, I guess, of what constitutes good parenting. And a lot of the time, it can come across as being in a superficial way. So I send my child to piano lessons. My child does this. He goes to that club and that club. But then when you deal with the child, it's almost like the time isn't there. There's not how much has been invested in the child. And sometimes, I don't know if this is politically correct, but I'm saying it from just my experience. I feel like by default, for not actually particularly being focused on the holistic development of a child, people are raising children that they're not going to be able to relate with. So,
I get that.
Like, even being in the classroom sometimes, it's like, wow. But can't really blame the children. They're coming from an environment. Even the parents are affected by the society.
When you say, what do you mean, wow? Like, wow, because they're so brilliant. Wow, because their eyes are so bright.
Because of the behavior, because of, like, basic manners and things like that, and how they manipulate.
Many parents aren't even at home to raise their children in the first place.
This is the point.
I think, like, many of us were latchkey kids at some point in our life, where you can come in from school or whatever, open the front door, you go in, you have your chores to do, you have to wash your school shirt and tidy up and start preparing the dinner. There's a lot of stories where that can be told. Nowadays, parents are working, a lot of parents, not all, are working all hours God sends. Their children are either at school from 8:30 in the morning. Remember, schools, some of them start at 8:30 till 6 o'clock. And, that's from the age of...
That's a long day.
That's a very long day. So who's actually parenting your child? You're no longer the parent of your child. So from 8:30 till 6 o'clock, you've got these other people who we've got all kinds of names for, but at the end of the day, if we're leaving these people responsible for the care, nurturing, and the holistic care that you've mentioned of our babies, then what else do we really expect going to happen? Yeah. Because we have all of these lessons going on in the class, like I mentioned before, and then some. And particularly with our children, who we know are disproportionately kicked out of school, who we know everything they do is under a microscope, who we know if they do end up getting kicked out, will more than likely come into the hands of the police because they're being groomed and all the stuff that goes along with it. But if our children are spending, 45 hours a week, sometimes some people's working days aren't even as long as our children not being in our company. So then you have Saturday and Sunday to undo the damage that's been done Monday to Friday.
If you even understand the damage that was done.
And that's what the other point I was going to make. You've got some parents, you mentioned the word slavery or black history. It's a wrap. They're switching off. Oh, no, that was long time. I'm going to go and buy my £255 weave. Oh, no, that was long time. My son or daughter's got on the best kit. Are these
people who then end up calling you for your help me get my child out of trouble services?
A lot of people, it's actually a very broad mix. I have lawyers. I have doctors. I have people who are unemployed. I have people that work. I have two-parent. It's such a mix. It's such a range.
You know what? But that point, the reason why it's such a mix is because it's systemic. So it's like, that's what one of the things I wanted to, we were kind of touching on it before in terms of how things have changed. I think you started the show talking about that. And that's one of the questions I wanted to ask in terms of, if we just maybe could talk about the ways in which society has changed and how maybe the skill set of being an effective parent. Like what skill set do you feel that parents need to be, effective in this day and time? Because I think what's happened a lot of time is things are based on how things were, but parents are unaware of who their children actually are now in the society.
Based on what you just said there, like what skill set do we need to have? I actually know if it's like that, because then when you were saying, like the village to raise a child, this might be a bit dread, but I actually think some of what we're suffering, we deserve because we refuse to come together and work and build. And, excuse me, if we don't actually, as parents, like you said, what's the skill set? The humility to know you can't do it by yourself and you're just going to fall into trouble. What is up against you is this is the point brother was making, what is up against you is so big that if you haven't come together to actually humble yourself and then even like you were saying, reevaluate your parenting on a day-to-day basis, because you just have to talk to your child. That's how I know how to reevaluate my parent. I've been doing it since you were small. When you talk to your children and they say something back, do you know that you can reevaluate your parenting from what just came back to you? I'm talking to my children at a point, and I was like, okay, I have to make some money, so I'm going to put them in state school. I put them in state school. About 2-3 weeks later, I called my child who normally answers, yes, Dad, and he said, yeah. Like, who told what? I got to reevaluate my parenting. Something ain't right. And when I reevaluated my parenting, they've been in somebody else's company where that stuff was okay. So I had to remove them from that situation, put them in a new situation, close the doors for a bit, close the curtains, fix up people's business, and then we get back to the work that we're supposed to get back to. But if you're not reevaluating and working with others, and I thank Allah for the Nation of Islam, because if I didn't have that team to work with and raising my children, I don't know how. But
that's the difference.
I would have
done
done
the
it.
Importance. You had a team. Some of these parents I deal with, I can be on the phone for 3 hours. They have nobody.
No support.
No support, which
Yes.
is why I had to just start something, because I'm like, listen, I'm overwhelmed with calls. I can't deal with
Because
everything.
both of you do that. That's both of
It's a
your
lot.
work is like support systems for parents. Am I right? So in terms of the support you give, how does that, David? How does that help develop? Because we're taught. I know personally, if I didn't have the support, I wouldn't be there. A lot of people don't even know they need support.
Yeah.
You all knew they needed support before they knew they needed support and are available to them. And I know you get cases like just that keeps you busy all day. So how does the support work, and how does it help to develop families?
I mean, if I talk about, there's two tiers to my support, because obviously there's the element of going to court with fathers specifically,
Yeah.
who have trying to
Which is a boss at. I will have to testify, brother. We're gonna get into that. Start with the other bit, and then
Okay,
you can
no
finish
problem.
on that bit. But I do want to talk about
I think
that
with
help you
regards to
give.
the parenting support, I think where I find, and look, where I say to the men I work with that I see myself as a farmer. I'm just dropping seeds, and it's up to them to nurture those
Nurture the
seeds.
seeds, yes, sir.
I think where I find a bit of success is that, unlike social services and the guys who give me the cases,
Yeah.
I make a connection with the guys I work with, who are not any more black or white or Asian. There's a good cross section of men that I work with.
Going through the same kind of situation.
Yeah, and I think for me, I have to get a connection. If I can't connect with someone and get them in the room, if I'm getting a referral from social services, you ain't got no choice. You got to be in the room. You got to be in the room. If you don't come to the room, then you run the risk of losing your child anyway.
But then if it's like that, do you make a connection with somebody?
So the thing is, the most difficult part is getting them physically to the room for that first meeting.
Yes.
After that, it's my job during that time, it's my job to make a connection with that person. And that's, for me, is the key. Because if I've mentally got you in the room, then I can get you to reevaluate. There's a chance for change.
Yes.
There's an opportunity for you to look at what I'm doing and think, and it's not about you doing it wrong. It's about, could you have done it different? Could you have done it in a way that might have...
It's not about you doing it wrong?
No, because I'm not going to tell you...
You're just being nice about that.
Well, I'm not there to tell you that you're wrong. Who am I?
Okay.
Who am I to throw any stones?
No, but does not the results tell me that didn't work?
Well, let's just think about, I'm going to be nice. I want you in the room.
I got you.
I want you in the room.
Yes,
and it's not going to be conducive to me to be telling you that you're getting it wrong. I want
I
you
understand.
to be in a place where you can consider what you're doing and reevaluate.
Yes.
Can I ask David something quickly? Is that all right? Just quickly, you see, because a lot of people have the idea that these parents, whether they be single mums, single dads, or the ones that are and aren't allowed to see the child, is it a case where you find that there's a lot of professionals, or you find these are what they would call the down and outs of society, as they've been labelled in my media, people that... Do you understand what I mean? Because the accusation of single parenthood or absent fathers is that it's always like the men's fault. They're no good. They're not working. They're not doing this. They're not doing that. They're abusive. Do you find that in what you're dealing with?
I mean, look, the cases that I take on, generally, literally to an individual case, there's a breakdown in communication. And generally, to be fair, I would not take on a case if I felt that the man, the father, was abusive or doing something overtly wrong. So, for example, when I first started doing the work, I said I would not work with men who had used abusive behaviour, right? And then I quickly changed my mind, because I was working with an organisation who works with men who have used violence and abuse. And I found that really quickly working with these guys is that even the guys that I were working with to deliver this work, they were so black and white. So if you came in that room and as an abuser, you were an abuser, and there was no two ways about it. And what I say is what I say, and you need to change.
Yes.
And I realised that my approach was very different, which was that, well, I'm human too, and I've felt certain ways.
Yes.
Maybe I haven't gone to the extents of you, but I've had those feelings.
Yes.
And I could relate to them in a different way.
Yeah.
So then I realised, well, if I don't help these guys, who will? So if a guy comes to me and he's been abusive, and I say, I'm not helping you to get contact with your child because you've been abusive, well, what good is that? Who is going to help him? Because we have a lot of services, rightly, who do support women who are victims. All right, but what about who's going to support you to change your behaviour?
Yes.
We have to, and all we're doing is moving that man
So
to someone else.
There's no
and he's going to do it again
rehabilitation.
anyway.
But the
He's gonna
thing
do it
is,
again anyway.
the
So
thing I find, do you remember there was this, we talked about it on the show a little while, there was a Caucasian lady who'd stabbed her boyfriend in Upset.
yeah, she was a Oxford or Cambridge graduate.
But she was too smart to fail, and she needed help, and she was to get looked after. But then I find it's like it's open season, and we sometimes do it among ourselves.
Exactly.
That we're quick to throw people away,
Right.
and no mitigating circumstances. And like you said, if you've been in a relationship, a close relationship with someone, and you've had children, everybody's got frustrated and felt, a way that they would not
and everyone's
be proud
probably
of.
fallen foul of in some way, shape or form. And that's another thing I say to the guys. I feel like all men in intimate relationships have displayed some kind of abusive behaviour, and they've probably been subjected to it. And because when we say abuse, we straight away think about violence.
Yes.
And that's what, so men get very defensive.
Well, and I don't know any men who would come out and go, "My brethren, she used to abuse me."
Yeah, no.
It's not really,
No,
because
no.
it would. Oh, maybe it might emasculate you, but we just have to carry that, because no one want to listen to you
It's not the
moaning
starting
about.
point.
Yeah,
It's not a barbershop conversation.
No.
That's for sure.
Not if
And
you want the good chair.
So going back to the point is, I've got to get those people to a place of actually saying, well, yeah, do you know what? Maybe I can
Handle this differently.
And just to take that point further, and it might be a bit controversial, but if we talk about we're talking about black parents here today. All right. One of the things I've realised is that black parents were excellent and really good at tough love. If you want to know how to tough love, come and ask a black parent. We know how to tough love.
Yes.
And if you want to know about a bit more nurturing, tactile love, go to maybe a European parent. Because little Johnny can't do no wrong, even when he is damn rude. Do you understand?
Yeah.
And when me and your child is damn rude, they're going to know that they're damn rude.
Yes.
And I think that there needs to be a little bit of shifting.
But this is that point you made. You said there are some things what was that thing you said earlier? Some things we are to keep. There are some things we should modify. Because that tough love thing, part of it, I think that's a modification.
It's necessary, but we need to be able to tell our children that we love them in the same, at the same,
Do you know,
in the same moment.
Funnily enough, because of these kind of conversations that we have, and even what's coming up, because like we get these videos that come through, and you'll see like the one we looked at one earlier today, and a sister was being accosted by police at a train station. Now I haven't seen it, but my first thought is, did she do something wrong? That's my first thought. Go ahead, brother.
I have to say, we need to be careful when we start to look at black and white parenting in this way, because there's a danger we start to stereotype ourselves. And this idea that somehow we are a lot much more tougher in regards to dealing with parenting, I would want to seriously question that. And I would say what we're dealing with is not so much black and white. I think we're dealing with more of class.
Okay, hold on. Please don't lose your point, because I'm coming right back to you. Sorry to concern. I know this is my elder, so I shouldn't really, but just because I was going to make that point. I was going to make that point because I was going to say, like with me, because of the types of situations we find ourselves in, I find myself talking about the tough love section of my parenting more in the public or with other people, because that's the conversation. Sometimes it's in jokes. Sometimes it's actually we had to deal with a thing. But then in terms of the sensitive parts of it, which for me really is a big part of it, like I'm very sensitive with my children. I've had to be, like when I'm by myself and their mum's not necessarily there, so I've had to deal with that. But that don't really come up in conversation. So it's not like it's not there, which is why I don't want to take your point. It's not like it's not there, but is it that we just don't talk about it? Sorry, Brother Minkah.
Yeah, and yes, and I think that's important because as I said, I have many children, and within all those children that I have, I've never seen need to have the time to really necessarily use any violence on those children. I think these children are very disciplined. I think these children are very focused. I have a family that also would have brought up children using those particular types of methods. It's I don't believe myself is particularly unique. So I just think that we need to really be careful about that, because it's an agenda which is actually being pushed very heavily about what we are as basically just being aggressive. And I think if you was to penetrate some of these working class white families, you would see some kind of behavior,
No doubt.
which, as far as I'm concerned, is not fundamentally different in regards to us. I do think, however, when we come and we're addressing this issue of parenting, I really do want to stress, and it's not really rocket science. This is not just an issue of individual parenting. And it's not an issue that's going to be resolved by so-called professionals either, okay? And I say not so-called professionals because professionals operate within the framework of the system. And I think whilst it is important to draw upon their support, if you look at our Saturday school as an example, we have a black parents group. And one of the things that people used to say was, why don't you go into your local schools and you can operate within there? And it says, well, in fact, a lot of the headaches that many of our parents are getting is actually from the schools in which that we're at. And once we now start to be an advocate for those parents, all of a sudden we're going to know that our services or we're no longer necessarily welcome there. So the importance of having a independent institution within our community is fundamental. And if we don't move away from that, then I think that we'll always be chasing our tails.
All right. Well, we're getting ready for the ad break, so I'm going to take that. We've been discussing parenting. We're going to do go through some of the other subjects we've got, and then we're going to have a free-for-all towards the end and just discuss whatever we want to discuss. But I guess the main thing we're letting go today is parents have to actually get together and do something. We have to reevaluate and work on our parenting. So we will be back. Obviously, you got like 10 seconds.
Well, we just to say, as a Saturday school, we have a black parents group, and it's not just open for children. Parents who are in our Saturday school, they're open to all parents.
Excellent. Well, okay, we'll be back on the other side of the ad break and we'll discuss that. Keep it locked. You're listening to the Talk Black Radio Show on Omega FM. Thanks for keeping it here.
Omega Radio, 104.1 FM. News and views around your community.
Okay, we are back after that commercial break. As ever, the commercial break is always hot. You don't get to see that sometimes. You might have to check us on Facebook to get that bit. But we were discussing in the break in terms of how the disconnect between parents and children. And David, you were talking about the disconnect. I like that little historical tidbit you gave earlier.
I wanted to chat my business.
In terms of
I'm an open book. It
scientific research, my brother. We're talking about the disconnect between parents and children, and you was giving us in terms of, because I did not know you come from such a household. Okay. And as I know this brother, his name was Anonymous.
Easy. That's the past. Come on.
All right. Go ahead.
DJ name. Anyway, so what we were having a heated debate. Your panelists disagreeing and agreeing on something. So the point I was making in the break is that, look, I think that there are many system-wise there was this stuff that hasn't been right.
Yes.
Still isn't right.
Yes.
And I think we have a responsibility to look at, okay, we have to fix. We need people like Cheryl who are trying to get that ton over the system.
Yes.
And our brother as well. To get things right, but we also have to say, well, okay then, but we're still working within this messed up system.
We've got a few people to get out before the gate closes.
Right, and so we still have to box clever within that system. And what I was saying is that I feel like one of the issues with parenting is there's a disconnect between the reality of your children and what they're experiencing, and you as a parent.
Yes.
So one of the things we hear about. Remember earlier when I said about that whole in my day.
Yes.
In my day, I went anywhere. I was from Northwest London and I went anywhere.
Yeah, me too.
I went South London, East London. I did a
Wickham.
business. However, the reality is my son cannot do that without an element of danger attached to that.
Yes.
Okay, that's the reality. That's about being in touch. So I was saying that, look, I came from a house two-parent house. My parents are still married, 50 odd years today. My dad's a pastor. My dad came here as a Garveyite, and I came from a house where we played no secular music. There was no.
So you had a good upbringing.
Nothing. Well, that doesn't necessarily constitute good because I didn't listen to secular music. However,
cool.
I'm just saying,
Yep.
no alcohol, no drugs, no domestic violence, whatever, right? And I didn't experience that. However, I was having sex at 13 and selling weed at 14. So now you're gonna say, well, so what is good parenting then? Because isn't that, you would imagine that constituted a good home, right?
Yes.
So my thing is that my dad was not connected with my reality. I had 4 older siblings who were brought up in the 70s and 80s.
Were they connected with their reality?
I don't know, but I don't know that he necessarily was, but things were much different. In terms of, so our parents, the parents of that generation kind of accepted what the school said.
Yes.
School said this, it was that.
Yes.
Yeah, the teacher said you was rude.
Yes.
My dad went and picked my sister up from school to wash dishes in those days, because that's how he was. Like, you didn't wash dishes. Yeah, he went and picked her up from school.
Okay.
Now, I fast forward to me being at school. My dad did not know what my reality was, stepping out of my front door and going to school. He didn't know what I was contended with. So mobile phones weren't quite out when I came to school. They came towards the end of my tenure of school, but things changed. And I wanted to, my friends were smoking weed, and I've always saw myself and still do as a businessman and an entrepreneur. And I figured, well, what's the point of them going to Joe blogs who they don't even know when I'm right here? I might as well create this supply line for them, and I did. And the reality is that when one of the sisters in the church told my dad, because I supplied her daughter. And her daughter got in trouble and used me as a scapegoat. Yes. Was nothing to do with the trouble.
This man led me astray.
Right. And my dad, I was taken to a house. Your son's selling drugs, and I'm like, Dad, look, this boy dropped it. I took it, and I just made a bit of money. My dad was sure I was selling weed for someone though. Yes. So he took me to and from school for 2 weeks because he was sure that some bigger man had got into. Do you understand?
But you was the bigger man.
Took me to the police. He took me to the police station. But when I opened the door to let him in, he soon changed his mind, and that was the end of that situation because he wasn't really going to take it to that next level.
Okay.
But he just wasn't in touch with what was going on.
Right.
And so that is the danger today, that parents are you're not worrying about what's going on your child's phone. You're not worrying. Bullying was what? Bullying happened at the school gates before, right? Or in the classroom.
Yes.
You could get, your son could be getting bullied while he's talking to you at home.
And on the telephone.
Right. And so, these are the things.
I've not understood that. Honestly, like I have a teenage son, and I regularly like to get the phone, and it's no big thing, but we just a spot check. You know what I mean? Like, and then he give me the phone. One time he gave me the phone, it's got a password on it. I'm like, I'm not stupid. Take the phone, put the password in, and give him back the phone. Got the phone.
To be honest, just at that point, that's a barrier for a lot of parents because society tells you that children are supposed to have privacy.
The rights of a child, Children's Act, 1989 Act.
In the school that I'm working at the moment, they have the UN Charter on the wall.
So rights of a child, the UN.
No,
so the children
child has a right. The child has a right. Any phone they purchase with money they earned and work for, and maybe that might be their business, especially if they live in a house of their own. But if it's still my phone, isn't it?
But the thing is, you've got to set those things from so early.
Yes.
Because you try to start telling your 14-year-old that you're taking his phone when you've never done it before, and you've never made him feel that actually a phone is a privilege.
Right.
Now you're going to have a problem.
Let me get it full. Let me get you the punchline. So I went on, and as far as I'm concerned, I know how we talk. Me and him's cool. Everything all right. If you've got anything, you come. But when I read the phone and saw what was on there and saw who was speaking to him, how they were speaking to him, what pictures they were sending, and what he was saying back. My son, who's quite mild, it's like he's some old kind of Pablo Escobar, bad man, 50 Cent. Like, and then when I'm saying, what's that? He's like, well, that's just how you talk, innit? I'm like, that's it? Then we had to take time and go through, like, because it doesn't, like you said about being in touch, it didn't make sense. Just going, this are madness, take the phone and gone.
And that's again a part of the lesson because in our days, give me that, blah, 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 lock off.
But it still stays with you.
So it's about you being able to talk to him about that. Well, even if he did have something inappropriate, I found my son with...
There was nothing inappropriate.
I have found my son with inappropriate
yes.
stuff on his phone, and I've had to talk to him. and educate him on, well, that shouldn't be what it is. Not just say, well, you're not going to have a phone. Because what does that do? It's going to just drive him in a
Because I think
direction anyway.
for today, and I know you wanted to get into the nitty gritty, but that's the bit that I kind of would like the listeners to go away with, is I'd like that some of the stuff that we just do. It's like I remember being in school and I didn't know what people was talking about when they said smack. I was like, what's a smack? I know beating. I don't know smack. Like, that's just not in our... When I learned, I'm like, oh, okay, that's what white people say. But from what I knew, but that's coming from where we've come from the Caribbean, where that's how people are sent to work of a morning, and that's what they do when they're on a plantation. It's a historical thing. Brother Minkah.
Yeah, I think the point that our brother David raises is very important, which comes back to the issue that I've been trying to advance without taking responsibility away from parents, which is that actually a lot of parents are actually doing what we call the so-called right thing.
Why do you say so-called and not doing the right thing? You said the so-called right
Yeah,
thing.
because we have a problem within our community, and a lot of people seem to think that we're not doing it. That's why I say the so-called. A lot of people think that we're not telling our children to come home on time.
Yes.
A lot of people think that we're not telling our children when they come home, take up a school uniform, do your chores, do your homework, right? And all of these things. They can write up a checklist of all of that. But as the brother said, he's coming from a very respectable household. But then he makes the point to say that, well, there's a disconnect between parents and children.
Yes.
And I'm saying there's not really a disconnect.
No.
The issue is that we are not really seeing the forces which are against us, and it's not going to be resolved just through parenting.
All right, well, hold on. It's the same point, though, because you said we're not seeing the issues.
Yes.
But that's the disconnect, is that you don't see the issues. Because I've had, funny, like me, I got to check your birth date. Because me and you, with your statements sound exactly like how mine state. Because I've got pretty much like brother, what I'm going through on a day-to-day basis my dad is saying come home and do homework. He has no idea what I'm going through on a day-to-day basis. So every statement that he makes, that whole list that you just gave, he'd make all of that, but it has no effect on me, because as far as I'm concerned, this dude has no understanding of what I suffer on a day-to-day basis. And it's kind of ruined our relationship as we've got older, because I just can't. There's no,
because what you hear a lot of young people say is that they're not being heard. They're not being listened to. No one cares. And then with that, my mum don't care. My mum's busy. My dad don't care. My dad's busy. It's not that your parents don't care, but that's how they feel. So then it's easy to then find that man on road who's going to...
Roadman understood.
Roadman will care.
I got my...
And that's how you end up in the
I
game.
learned on Harlesden High Street at the phone shop. That's where I would go and get a reasoning that would make sense to me about the next step.
Someone's listening.
Right.